Good morning. This is Carol Dixon. I'm with the Idaho Federation of Families for Children's Mental Health, and I want to welcome you to our July parent webinar. Today we are very pleased to have Maureen Dunning and Jane Zink join us. They're presenting on strong families, and their discussion is going to be focused around the strengthening families' protective factors. And Jane, who has been in the field for 30 years, working along issues of has been working in the field of parent education, child abuse and neglect prevention, and training design. She's the owner and director of Butterfly Trainings at Transform. And Jane is the co-author of numerous Strengthening Families training curriculums, and she's been working for over 10 years to implement the Strengthening Families Protective Factors framework, across systems and within organizations. So they bring a lot of experience and information to the table around something I think that is very important, in that it is not just specific to any one population or system. It goes through education, childcare, mental health, all aspects. Every family has these strengthening factors within their family. A lot of it's about developing them, and they're going to kind of speak in depth to that. So I think it's going to be an informative one. Just real quick to let you know that next month on August 3rd, we're going to have Brian Huck, who was a LCSW from St. Luke's, and he's going to join us, and his topic is worn out, fatigue, tired parenting, and disruptive behaviors. So please consider joining us for August also. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jane and Maureen and let them tell us a little bit about who they are, what they've been doing, and what they're going to do with us today. Thank you, ladies, for joining us.
Oh, sure. Thank you, Carol. First of all, you have us switched. I'm Maureen and she's Jane.
Okay, excuse me.
Jane and I have been working together for, 10, 12 years now, I guess, to help families build and recognize their strengths. All families have strengths, as you said. This is the cover. Well, it's not up there now. The graphic that was up there, that's the cover of our most recent training manual. We've done many trainings and curricula over the years, and one of the things that we wanted to do was to have like a compendium book that professionals who work with families could use. There's 55 lesson plans in that book, and they are all designed to be used either with parent groups directly or for professionals who are working with parents. And there were nice, well-written, easy-to-follow lesson plans that anybody working with parents can use. Today, what we'd like to do is introduce you and the audience to the protective factor framework that is the hallmark of strengthening families. We'll talk about what it is, what this protective factor framework is, what it protects us from, why it's important, and how to use it in your own life as parents, or how can we as professionals help parents to build these protective factors that we all already have. Jane, would you like to add anything?
Well, my name is Jane Zink, and I work for the Idaho Stars Project, and I really work to educate childcare providers and programs about the Strengthening Families Protective Factor framework, and to integrate the framework into their practice so that they can in turn promote the protective factors in families, so that they can learn how to recognize and promote parent strengths across the gamut. And so I'm really excited to be here to talk about all the strengths that we know families have, and how we can capitalize and recognize and accept and promote the protective factors in each other.
Okay, next slide. So here are these 5 protective factors. One of the things I love about the Strengthening Families framework is that it's simple. It's simple to remember. It's only 5 protective factors. You can name them on one hand. So Strengthening Families began about in the early 2000s, I guess. It was about 2000, 2001. The Center for the Study of Social Policy, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C., worked with the Doris Duke Charitable Foundation to try to figure out what are the factors that families who thrive, that children have good outcomes, what are some of the factors that these families share? And so they did a study, they did a nice scientific study, and they came up with these 5 protective factors. And they are parental or personal resilience, they are healthy social connection, concrete support in times of need, knowledge of parenting and child or adolescent development, and cognitive and social and emotional competence. And what we're going to do today is break those down. We're going to talk about each one and give some examples of those things, and hopefully you in the audience will be able to get a sense of what these things are in your own lives, in your children's lives, and how you can not only help your children develop these protective factors, but how you can help each other. And as professionals working with families, what are some of the everyday actions that you can do or that you're already doing that can help build these protective factors?
Right, and so the protective factor framework protects us from something, and that's from being overwhelmed by the effects of stress in our life. So it's a buffer. It's a way of understanding that when these 5 things are present and robust in families, that the likelihood that we'll be overwhelmed by the stress in our life goes way down, and outcomes for parents and children goes way up. And the 2 key points about the framework is that it's strength-based and then that it's a 2-generation approach. So strength-based is important. Every family has strengths. And really, it's our responsibility and our challenge to recognize those strengths, especially when we're feeling frustrated or discouraged or overwhelmed. And so how can we continue to recognize our own strengths and the strengths of others in our family? And it's a 2-generation approach, meaning that recognizing that family is a system, and that what we do for parents supports children, and what we do for children supports parents, and that changes the trajectory of people's lives. And so it's a very hopeful framework, and it's a very simple framework, like Maureen said, and we're really looking forward to sharing more about it.
So this is the approach. The approach of the Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework is, like Jane just said, it protects us from being overwhelmed by stress, and it also promotes the best outcomes for our children. These are the small but significant everyday actions. Sometimes when we work with child care providers, they are amazed that, oh gee, you mean greeting the parents at the door when they come in the morning and calling them by their name? That's something that can help relieve stress in their families. It's sometimes very small, and they seem so insignificant that it's hard sometimes to imagine the great power that these things can have. But when you think about how important it is when you bring a meal to a new mom, and how that can relieve the stress of her having to feed her family for that night. I can think of a time when I was having a meltdown at work, and a coworker came up and put her arm around me and said, let's go out for a cup of coffee, and how little things like that can make a big difference in building your own resilience and being able to get on with your life.
Right, and I think from the perspective of parents, a parent can help other parents recognize their own resilience, right? This is how we can support and come to each other's real concrete aid. And we can also work to intentionally promote these protective factors in our children. There's a lot of information out there about resilience, for example, and how can we teach our children resilience? It's a whole new area of research. And so as parents, what tiny actions can we make to make sure our children are developing some grit or developing some resilience? And how can we use our knowledge of their unique child development to really give them what they need, and to help others learn more about how children develop on a trajectory that really is all their own, right? It depends on it. No child is exactly the same, and how we can have realistic expectations for our own child, and knowing that and knowing what's realistic for our own child can then reduce stress in our family, because we're not imposing some other expectations on them that are just not reasonable or not accurate. And parents are their children's first and best teacher. You are the expert on your child, and so the protective factors are especially relevant and especially important in that family setting.
Mm-hmm. So when Strengthening Families first began, it was very focused on families with young children. It was focused on families with children really birth to 5, birth to 8, children who were found in childcare facilities. As the project has grown, the realization is that the protective factors really span the lifetime. They go from birth from birth all the way to death. Do you want to talk a little bit about the span in the Youth Thrive?
Sure. So when children are young, we know that they really depend on their parents to be the stress buffer and the caregiver, and to model the protective factors to the best of their ability. And then as children age, as they move through adolescence into early adulthood, then they become more independent, more autonomous, and they begin to develop into their own selves as their peer group becomes more important, or their social group, or their school setting, or settings away from the family. And so the protective factors shift a little bit. The essence of the protective factors stay the same, but the more specific interpretations of them shift a little bit. So we move, for example, from parental resilience when children are young to personal resilience when as children grow and develop. Or we move a little bit from social and emotional competence to social and emotional and cognitive or moral or moral competence as children develop and grow into their own people. So in that way we can think about using the protective factors not only to affect children as they grow, but the parents that they will become. Mm-hmm. And here's a graphic that kind of just talks a little bit about Youth Thrive, thinking about how we can increase the protective factors, reduce risk factors, and then how that leads to healthy growth and development. And that's the essence of the protective factor framework. Like, how can we combine, we can reduce risk and we can promote the best optimal outcomes. Mm-hmm. And so why is this really important? I think in the past we've talked a little bit about stress, about how stress can negatively affect a child's development. So we know that for children, if they live in repeated or severe or unrelieved stress, that can be toxic stress, and it can affect the architecture of the brain. And there are a lot of examples of that, medical examples, and here's just a graphic. This is an extreme example of 2 3-year-old children. On the left is a brain scan of a typically developing child, and on the right is a child that's been subjected to extreme neglect. And so we can see that there are differences in the way the brain looks, and we know that that is related to the kind of stress that that child is experiencing in the earliest years. We also know that the brain is built for a real manageable load of stress, but when children live in environments that are high stress over a long period of time, that's when the stress becomes too manageable, too high to manage in a way that the body is designed to manage stress, and then that's when children can really suffer. So when we talk about the protective factors, we really are talking about ways to affect children for their whole lifespan by trying to reduce stress in families.
Okay. Let's see here. So we're talking about stress, and I know a lot of the families who are watching here today have children with complex needs. A lot of the professionals watching this are working with families with complex needs, and the protective factors can really help to prevent or mitigate the stress that are in these children's and our own lives. And so through recognizing and building these protective factors, we can really help to give our children the very best possible outcomes they can have. So what we'd like to do now is look at each one of these protective factors, and we're going to look at them and define and discuss each one. So the very first protective factor, the one that we kind of think of as overarching over all the rest, is resilience. And Carol, what do you think resilience mean? What does resilience mean to you?
So I always think of resilience as the kind of the bounce back factor. Mm-hmm. Is when there's been a challenge, something's gone wrong, and a child's or family's ability to kind of like bounce back from it and get back to that place of, a functioning and being able to feel okay about what happened and continue to move forward. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, resilience has become a real tag word right now. Mm-hmm. I Googled resilience one day and got, I think, 42 million responses. Sometimes they use the word grit, but it's even more, I believe, than bouncing back. It's when you bounce back and you're even better than you were before. It's not bouncing back to the same level. It's having something adverse happen in your family, and you get through it and you come back even stronger than before. What do you think, what does resilience look like? When people that you know are resilient, Jane, what do you think that strong people look like?
I think that they are not defined by the present, like by their present circumstances, right? I mean, one of the key hallmarks of resilience is hope. So people who are resilient have hope. They see that there's something beyond the present, that there's something to keep working for or move forward to. In the literature, they call it future-oriented, but I just like to think of that as just having hope. I think that resilient people and resilient families have kind of a good sense of humor, right? They understand, they can kind of laugh about their circumstances, or make, no matter how dire it is, to think and use that as a way to keep moving on. I think they're supportive of each other. I don't know, what else do you have? Can you think of anything else?
Well, to me, this ties into, so with the families that are watching today is kind of tied back to what you said earlier, is recognizing the trajectory of your child.
Yes.
And kind of what, where the direction that they are going. And as things happen, is that it's moving you to a better place each time. Each challenge may make you a little bit stronger as a family, but really looking at what the individual needs of that child are. Because it is hard. It's tough. I mean, school's hard. Social relationships are hard. A lot of going out within the family or extended family into the community can present challenges. So when something happens, how do you as a family respond? How do you be stronger? How do you use sense of humor to be able to deal with that, so that you don't end up just kind of depleted and exhausted at the end of each day?
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
So I think that's huge.
Right. Right.
And that does help us to reduce stress.
Right.
If you've got that future-oriented, if you've got that sense of humor, if you feel kind of like this too shall pass, like there's going to be, this is going to pass, something else is going to take its place, but at least it's part of how you're going to roll with the punches in your life.
How do we keep going forward?
Right, and it's also about celebrating all the baby steps, right? I mean, everybody's success looks different, and we all define that differently. So every time that we can say, oh my gosh, I went to the store and I came home and I was able to make my purchase, right? Instead of having to leave, it's like, yes, that is a win for us. Let's celebrate that in whatever way that we can.
Right.
So I think that recognizing success and being generous with your understanding of your own success, and being generous with your praise and of each other, because resilient families in the end don't turn on each other. Right? They stay connected, they stay forward, they stay in support, they're looking for what's going right. And so I think it's really, being strength-based is a big part of being resilient.
One of the, at the end of this, we're going to share some websites that have some resources. And on the Center for the Study of Social Policy website, it's strengtheningfamilies.net. They have what's called a self-assessment form. And they have self-assessment forms that explain some of the everyday actions for each of the protective factors that you can look at and think, oh, okay, well, am I doing that now? Is that something I could add? I printed out a few of them, and like for resilience, what could I do or how could I promote for families to manage the stressors of everyday life, calling forth the inner strength to proactively meet personal challenges? How can I help other people believe that they can make and achieve goals? How is that something that, like if I'm a professional working with families who are under stress, sometimes just having that supportive arm around somebody can really, really help. So we'll encourage everybody to go to this website and see these lists that are available, that you can kind of gauge yourself against and say, these are some of the things that I could add to my life.
But I think that I just wanted to say that we can always help each other become more resilient, right? I mean, you think of in your ordinary life, if someone is angry, for example, how can we help that person manage their emotions, right? Either give them a place to vent, to be a good active listener, to think of, if they need resources beyond that to help them manage and deal with their anger. How can we try to connect them with the right resources so that they can do that? So I think that we can we don't need to be a professional helping someone else be resilient. As friends, we can help each other be resilient. As family members, as parents. And so I think that the resource that you mentioned does indeed talk more about professionals, but these are things that we can also use in our own family. Like with my own teenager, right? How do I be strength-based with my own teenager when I really am not feeling it?
Right.
Right? I'm not feeling it, but that's my, as a parent, if I can try to be more intentional about that, how can I make that happen? And that can build my child's resilience. And I think that the bigger question that we should all be thinking about is when you have resilience in your family, let's talk about this. When you have resilience in your family, how does it reduce stress?
Boy, I know for me, I grew up in a very resilient family, which was really nice. My father lost his job when he was in his late 50s, and I remember thinking, I was like 14 at the time, and there was a chance that we were going to have to move, and this, that, and the other, and but my mom sat us down and said, we're going to be fine, and I believed her. Right. And we were. Things were a little rough for a year.
And there's no promise that it's going to be easy.
Correct.
Yeah. So
Correct.
The idea
Correct.
that future thinking is that it's going to be okay.
Right.
This is hard right now. This is not working right now. But I think when parents are setting that kind of an atmosphere environment that we're going to be okay, we're going to work together, we're going to be forgiving.
Yes.
That whatever may have just happened, we will deal with it. We'll support you. We're going to move forward.
Right.
But that we as a family are connected.
Right. When I first started learning about resilience, I bought myself a bracelet that said, "We can do hard things."
Right.
And I think that's a phrase that I've really tried to adopt with my kids, right? When they are really poor or when they are in school and they're struggling, to say, you can do hard things.
Right.
And I think that's a good reminder for us.
That's exactly what I was telling Carol and Jane earlier, that a very close friend of mine is in a graduate program, and it's an online program, and she was having a horrible time with it. And she posted on Facebook. Now, Facebook wasn't around when I was in school, but now it is. As she posted on Facebook, "I can't stand this program. I'm going to quit." And immediately there were about 35 messages from all of her closest friends saying, "What can I do to help? You can do this." And so she didn't quit. And I thought, social media now can really be a way of connecting and helping people to be resilient, especially with families who may be isolated, who may have difficulty getting out if you've got several children, and sometimes transportation's a problem, sometimes you just don't have the energy to get out the door. And so, making that phone call or posting something on social media could be a really good way of staying connected with people.
And I have seen
especially
that.
with people who are in the same
Right.
circumstances.
So I
you
have
are.
definitely seen that work with the parents that we work with, is that when they are more connected to other parents who share a similar experience, and if they will reach out during those moments of crisis or those moments of exhaustion, that really helps them in terms of their ability to just sustain themselves, take care of themselves, and then go back and be able to deal with whatever's going on in the family at that point in time. So yes, that's an important part of resilience, is to be able to reach out, re-energize, share your experience with someone who understands it. And I think that's the key part. If they're trying to share with someone who doesn't get it and just kind of goes, "Really?"
Right.
It's really different than
Right.
someone who you say, "It's been a really tough day. My Janie couldn't even get out of bed today before something started."
Right.
And to be able to go, "Got it. You don't have to
Right.
tell me anymore. I got it."
Right. I see you. So this is a perfect segue to our next protective factor, which is healthy social connections. So social connections, the protective factor is actually called social connections. I'm trying to advance the slide there, if you will, please. There we go. Thank you.
There it
social,
is.
Social connections. We use the phrase healthy in front of social connections because not everyone really has even a template for a healthy social connection. Some people really have to learn that as they mature and grow into what a healthy healthy relationships looks like. But we talk about safe relationships. So what you're describing is an emotionally, physically safe relationship with someone where you can be your true, authentic self, and someone can accept that. So when we think about the importance of having friends with whom we feel connected, who are constructive and they're supportive, not only the people themselves but the institutions, if we're working across in a system to help our family, it can make a huge difference in our lives. And so let's talk a little bit about what does that mean for someone. What do you think of a healthy social connection or a healthy friendship or relationship? What are the hallmarks of that for you?
I think being non-judgmental.
Yes.
I think so often when families have kids with complex mental health needs is that they often have that sense of judgment and criticism from those who do not understand what it means to have these particular challenges in their life. So someone who is like accepting,
Yes.
non-judgmental,
Right.
open.
Right. Right. What else? Any other hallmarks that you can think of?
Someone you feel safe with, that you can. I'm thinking when I was a young mom and I met my dear, dear friend Sally, and we were in Germany. Both of our husbands were in the Army. We were alone, and we had children of a similar age, which is sometimes a real hallmark of a time when you form lifelong social connections with people, when you're going through the same parenting stages at the same time with someone. But I knew that I could call her. I remember one time I was sick as a dog and had my little 18-month-old, and I called her up and she said, "No problem, I'll come over and get her." And she came over and picked up Nikki and took her for the whole day while I was sick. So I felt safe. We knew each other well enough to know that our parenting styles were very similar too. So I knew that Nikki would be taken care of by her the same way as she would be taken care of by me, and that was really important to me. It's also the whole thing of healthy social connections when like in dating relationships. When I have two daughters, and so you worry, they're grown now and they're both married to wonderful men, but when they're in dating relationships and you want to tell them about now, don't go out with a guy who you wouldn't have friends that you wouldn't be friends with. There's that thing about feeling healthy and safe in a relationship. And if you've helped your children to have good, healthy social connections when they're young, then lo and behold, they end up with wonderful men when they grow up too, which is really nice.
Right, because they have a template of what it looks like and what it feels like to be in that relationship. And I think that we've all been through the situation, if we've raised children or in any capacity, that when you're in the trenches with somebody and somebody else is in the trenches as well, it feels so good to have someone to talk to,
Right.
and to sometimes compare notes with, or to ask for strategies, right? All these things. And so we know that healthy social connections are important for families, and as you described, you see it in the families that you work with as they connect with each other and support each other.
And often for the children, it's harder to find and develop the social connections.
Yes.
So I think one parent's modeling what does a
Yes.
good relationship look like, and they're really trying to help their children, to support their children as they develop those relationships, because they don't come as easily sometimes.
Right.
So seeking out, where is a safe place that they can find kids? How do they connect? So it's a challenge, but it's an important one for those kids to be able to understand it and have those relationships.
So let's just talk about that a minute. So how do we help children find a healthy social connection? Or how do we find them if we're feeling like that's not present in our lives? Like I could really use somebody who understands me, who's not going to judge me, who is willing to listen to me. How do we find that if we don't have it? Does your organization support parents in helping find that for each other?
And that's a hard question, because I think so often parents are looking and seeking those relationships. And do we have like the groups in place, often we don't. So we do try to refer. There are some ongoing groups. I know, like here in the Treasure Valley, I can't speak as well. I know outside of the Treasure Valley, there are other organizations like Idaho Parents Unlimited. They also are across the state, and they've got ongoing groups. And then we also, the Federation, throughout the state, have some opportunities to connect parents. So yeah, so it may be connecting to an organization who can refer you on. There are certainly some like Facebook groups. There's things like the Boise Autism Moms, who have a great social network going on. The Idaho Federation is working with the Parent Network, which is a group of parents that is just kind of beginning. It's a new organization where they're connecting parents across the state, specifically with kids who have severe emotional disturbance, to provide information and support and connection. So yep, sometimes it's like reaching out and saying, this is what I'm looking for. Where can I find a group or an individual to help?
And sometimes a community-based organization, a church, for example, or even a book club, or if you'd like to knit,
Great
or something
idea.
that supports your hobby, or fly fishing, whatever it is that you need, so that relationship can become a form of self-care for yourself. That's all going to reduce stress in families, and I think that we all immediately understand how having a friend, even one, really can reduce stress in our families, and that's what the power of that protective
So I like
factor.
what you're saying there, because sometimes it's going out to nurturing some of those things that you don't take time for.
Yes.
So what are some of the passions you have, some of the interests you have that you haven't had time for?
Right.
And just trying to carve out a little bit of time, because this is important. Because the more you take care of yourself, the better you can take care of your family. So is there something that you're really interested in that can be your special place, and then finding hopefully a friend or connection through there? That's a great idea. I like that, Jane.
And even if it's someone that you can just, you can text that person at 11 at
Right.
night, right? I mean, even if you can't get out of the house, but if you can use that to establish the connection, it doesn't mean that it means you can use it when you're home and feeling isolated.
We have a couple of lesson plans in our manual about exactly what you're talking about. We call it filling your own cup, filling your own
Right.
loving cup, and how if your cup is depleted, you have nothing to give. You have nothing to give to your children. You have nothing to give to your spouse or to anyone else. And so how can you replenish that? And how important it is, and not to feel guilty if you are taking time for yourself. You
Right.
know, especially families with children with complex needs like you work with here. You have to have that time to, regenerate your own help, whether it's spiritually or mentally or physically. We were talking about yoga, yoga, church, book club. All of those things are just really important.
Yeah, and and parents in general, but I think moms specifically tend to be pretty self-sacrificing.
Yes.
And so it's recognizing that really, like you're saying, it's not benefiting the family for you to run yourself dry.
Right.
And part of being able to take care of your family is to take care of yourself and to have to build some social connections, and to find some things that are important for you
Right.
to do.
And it can be baby steps. I think that we all
Totally.
we suffer from that. So I mean, it can be literally 5 minutes in the bathroom with the door closed and locked, doing a little breathing.
Yeah.
Or it can be a shower if you haven't had one for a few days, right? So it doesn't need to mean that we're all going to, escape
For the weekend.
for the weekend, or go away, even, go shopping or something. I mean, it can be very much baby steps that help us throughout the day and through difficult times.
Well, and also feeling like you can, there's a friendship that you can invite someone into your house, and the
Yes.
home may be chaotic.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this friend can come and can sit and can be with you
Right.
and spend time with you there.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Or that you can take your children into their home. It's a safe environment, again, without judgment, and just to have that space that you all can be together.
We often call it "come into my kitchen for tea."
Right. Right.
And I don't care if the house is a mess, and I don't care if I'm a mess. I don't care if I haven't showered.
I'll help
in
you
3
fold
days.
your laundry,
Yes,
and we'll
and
be
we
at your
can
house
talk.
doing the same
Yes,
thing next
yes,
week.
yes. Perfect.
Years ago, I'm a breast cancer survivor, and I had, in 19 years, I'm fine. So I had a friend who, when I was diagnosed and was going through chemotherapy and all of that stuff, she said, "Call me if you want your bathrooms cleaned." And I thought, now this is a good friend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That I knew I could call her and ask her for anything. One other thing about social connection is that some people need lots and lots of friends and support. Some people only need one or two people. So that's kind of an important thing to learn about yourself. You know, do you need a great big group of support people in your life, or is that one or two friend, or calling that special aunt, or calling your old Girl Scout leader, or whoever, you know, that one special person in your life that can help you get through the times when you need a person.
Yeah, and it's a roller coaster. I mean,
Yeah,
a lot of our families, I mean, it is a day-to-day thing where they're hitting highs and lows all within one day, and, you know, day after day. Right? So it's exhausting.
Yes, yes.
So the next protective factor is knowledge of parenting and child development, and along with Youth Thrive, it's child and adolescent development. So this is having a basic understanding of some parenting techniques. We like to call it parenting that promotes peace, peaceful parenting techniques, peaceful discipline techniques, and also understanding child development so that you understand at each age level what your child is likely to be doing, so that you aren't upset when your 2-year-old says no all the time, because that's what 2-year-olds do. You know?
Right.
So what does knowledge of parenting and child development mean to you?
So the first thing that comes to me is that a lot of it is not typical child
Correct.
development. So we're dealing with some, you know, so different types of a different trajectory, as you all said earlier. So how important it is to, you know, be able to get the information, to be educated in terms of, you know, what is it that the disorder that your child has, and what are the typical types of behaviors, and how do you parent specifically to be supportive and to help with growth in that. So it's, you know, it's, and then you have sometimes, you know, within a family you have neurotypical children.
Right.
So you've got all these different styles of parenting
Right.
that you have to be able to integrate together with the recognition that you're going to parent, you know, Jimmy very differently than you parent Jamie.
Right.
And it takes, you know, if it is working with your doctor or with your therapist, or doing a lot of research online, working with different organizations to find out how do we do this, so that you know, so parents are aware of what the needs are for each child.
And it's not easy in any family. Often in a parenting class, we'll have a temperament scale. Every child is born with a different temperament. There's 9 characteristics of temperament, and we'll have people chart their own temperament on this scale. Then they're first child, second child, third child, fourth child. Oh, then they add a parenting partner 1 and parenting partner 2. And when you hold up the page, it's like a hot mess.
Right.
I mean, it's everywhere. And so then those are the questions, right? Those are the questions that we have to thoughtfully ask ourselves. Like, if some people in my family love routine and some people can't manage routine,
Right.
like where's the give and where's the take? And I think that that's an exercise that combines both knowledge of parenting and child development. And if you could do that with your friends, and if your friends could also do that for her family or his family, and then we could have a discussion about, look at this, like, no wonder this is such a challenge, right? On top of all the other things we're dealing with, this would be hard anyway. And so what do you do? And what am I going to do? And you know, I'm going to try this, and I'm going to tell you how that worked for me, and you're going to try that and tell me how it worked for me. And so that in this way, the protective factors begin to overlap and combine, because the more we know about child development and parenting strategies, we can test those, we can compare and contrast with other families and establish something that might work that we didn't know about. And then that in turn builds our social connection, and it also promotes our resilience. So as all these things start to blend together, right? And they're all ways combining together to reduce stress. So knowledge of parenting and child development we don't have to be experts. I'm sure that many of your families, frankly, I'm sure many of the parents watching this are experts in their child's
Exactly.
in their child's disorder, and that's amazing. But you don't have to know everything about every possible branch of child development. It's just the basic knowledge and expectations that you can use. And so what does it look like, do you think, when a parent or a family knows about child development?
To me, it looks like confidence. Parents who have a basic understanding of child development are those that are calm in the grocery store when the child is having a fit. They're not thrown off. They have a sense of humor. It kind of goes back to resilience. They have a sense of humor about whatever stage their child is in. I imagine with the child with families with children with complex needs, it's ratcheted up to a much higher degree than those with typically developing children, because there's just so much more to learn and so much more to so much more that may not be innate. You know, as parents, if we have grown up, typically we kind of expect, you know, oh, I remember what it was like when I was 10. But if it's completely different for your 10-year-old, then you have to learn a whole new construct.
You know, and a lot of times I say it's like having a toolbox with extra tools,
Right.
And how important it is that parents take the opportunity to add new tools, and for it to not being felt like they're being told that they're inadequate parents,
Right.
Because there are parenting classes or there are resources available, but to be the understanding that yes, these are not tools that I have because this is not a typical situation. So what extra skills do I need to add so that builds my skills as a parent? Because the reality is that, you know, parents are the ones 7 days a week, 24 hours a day that are trying to figure out, how do I deal with this situation? There's just been a meltdown because my child's shoelaces, all of a sudden they couldn't tie them on the first time, and we've lost it.
Right.
So those are new skills on how do we de-escalate that? How do we continue to move forward? How do we address that? You know, okay, we're going to be able to tie these shoes. Let's start here and let's do it this way.
Right.
So yeah, exactly what you're saying
Yeah.
is the idea of, you know, adding new skills, having the information, going in with confidence. And it doesn't mean that things aren't going to happen. It just means that you're going to be okay when things happen, and recognize that we're going to get through it. We're going to address the issue. We're going to move to the next place.
Yeah.
Right.
And
Continue
again,
going.
going back to the whole idea of strengthening families is, how does that then reduce stress? It always goes back to, how does it reduce stress? Because that's what that's what the protective factors are protecting us from. They're protecting us from being overwhelmed by stress. So having that confidence that this shoelace thing, we are going to get past it, is going to help reduce the stress in your life.
And I'd just like to kind of talk a little bit about what a strengths-based parenting class looks like. Oftentimes we take parenting classes that are more skills-based, but I think a strengthening families parenting class is the type of class that really focuses on that really is reflective in terms of your own parenting. Because where do we learn to parent generally in our country?
From our parents.
Yeah, from our parents. We were raised.
We learn to parent from our parents, and that can be great, and it can be not so great. And so, putting on top of that, if we are not raising, you know, the same kid twice, right? I have 4 kids. I said I raised 3 kids. I just raised the same kid 3 times. And now I'm raising a different kid. And so I had to learn new skills and adjust. But a strength-based parenting class really is focusing on, it's very reflective. So it's thinking about your own family culture, the culture in which you were raised. What behavior were valued? Was quiet really valued in the culture of your family? Was being not very assertive really valued in the culture of your family? And so then how does that affect your parenting and your expectations for your own children? When we talk about what nurturing looked like, were people physical? Were they hugging and kissing and loving and saying I love you? Was that the way nurture was shown? Or is it through or food? Did they feed you when they wanted to nurture you? Or was it a little bit of tough love, but really you understood it as nurturing? So what does nurturing look like? And then what role did listening play? Were you listened to? Was your temperament honored? All these things that we experienced then reflect out in our parenting. And a lot of them are unconscious, right? When we talk about the cultural iceberg, for example, well, much of that is under the water. We don't see it. We just intuitively absorb it as we're having a cultural experience in our family. Every family has a different culture. And so how can we kind of take those out of the water, look at them and say, this is a parenting practice that works for these children in my family, and these are parenting practices that really don't work for these kinds of children in my family. And how do I grapple with what I've learned in my lifetime that it means to be fair, right? Fair or equitable in our treatment. And so these are all the kinds of conversations in a strengthening families parenting class that we can have that are not so much about skills. It's about looking and learning about yourself and then making a decision to try something or to not to try something. And then as the class progresses, then it becomes more about what does active listening look like, and what is the value of listening, and why does that matter, or win-win problem solving, or as Maureen said, self-care, and what that looks like for not only for you, but for your relationship with your family, with your child that has complex needs, and or your children that don't have complex needs. And so what does that look like? So I think that there's a lot of ways to think about parenting, and there's a lot of ways to learn about child development, and it doesn't have to be necessarily a 1, 2, 3-step process, that this is the length of time out of your child, is this, those tools have their place, but I think that there's also opportunities for kind of bigger and broader and deeper explorations of parenting that are really important opportunities.
And I think the more that you know, the less that you are then surprised.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No matter what child you're parenting.
Right.
It's just, it just gives you kind of that framework to be like, yeah, this is a typical type of behavior that I would see based on the age of a child or based on the challenges that a child have. And when that happens, then it doesn't knock you down. Then you just kind of go, yeah,
Right.
yeah, that's
Right.
not unusual.
Right. And a lot of parents are, when they're surprised by a child's behavior, for example, some people think a 2-year-old's defiance they interpret that as a lack of respect, not understanding that a 2-year-old really isn't capable of respect, or people think their babies don't like them because their babies cry a lot. And so understanding the developmental, not only the developmental what's appropriate for a child, but understanding your relationship with the behavior and what you're feeling and why you're feeling that. Those are great conversations to have if people are interested.
Well, and then I kind of hear you saying like to depersonalize some of those behaviors, because I think often when parents take a child's behavior and feel like it is, against them, then it's harder. It creates that wall. So being able to recognize that some of the things that happen aren't necessarily about your relationship.
Correct. And that sometimes we bring baggage to our parenting, right? Like let's say we feel like we have some things that we're struggling with about feeling rejected in general, right? Then when we're feeling like our baby doesn't like us or something like that, then it's like, oh, is that really about the baby, or is that bringing up something to me that I'm not really sure what that's about?
Yeah, because I'm thinking about the kids that come home from school. And school, for a lot of the kids that we're working with, that is a really challenging place. And some of them will work very hard to hold it together. And it's when they get home, that exhaustion, that anxiety, that all of that just comes spilling over. And who gets it? The parents get it. Sure. So it's being able to recognize it's not about me. That's about my child who has just really struggled throughout the day. So how do I help them be able to kind of let off some of that steam, and that what they're saying, if their angriness is not really so much directed to me, but I'm just getting the behaviors.
Yeah, right.
How do we deal with those behaviors?
And and actually when that child, like you said, holds it together for a certain amount of time and then decompresses with you, that means they feel safe with you. We have a lesson plan in the book called Relentless Compassion, which I love, about how you can't disappoint me enough. I'm going to be here for you no matter what. Right. And if your child feels that, they're going to feel that nurturing and that support. And they're going to know that you are going to be there, that no matter what. And that is just, that takes you, it takes you sky high as a child to know that there's someone in your life that feels that way. Hopefully children will have many people in their lives. They'll not only have their parents, but they'll have grandma and the man who lives next door and the Boy Scout leader and the school librarian and lots of people who unconditionally love and support them. That's what all children need. That's what all people need.
Right, and it's challenging. So challenging. I think that's one of those ideals that you could work on your whole life and hope you get there.
That's
it's hard.
And as professionals working with parents and with children, we as professionals can be that one person for that, hopefully that one of many people for those children. We can let them know that we unconditionally love and support you. And there's a lot of other ideas on those self-assessment forms that we're talking about. So I hope everybody.
Well, and I also think kind of going along with what you're saying is that a lot of times the kids, they can't see down the road very far. They just see that things aren't working well, that they're, they don't have friends and they're not doing well in school and they're always in trouble. And it's like the parent or that other adult has to sometimes hold for them the idea that, you know what, no, you are a wonderful person. You are capable of doing things that that you will be proud of, that I'm very proud of as your parent, and that I love you very much. Because sometimes what is pushed back to them from society or from the culture that they are in, school or wherever, is a negative image. And the kids then hold on and absorb that. So they need someone that is giving them that positive feedback, that reinforcement is that, I do love you, that you are going to do great things in your own world. And you have to, and to be able to let go of some of the things that have happened that made you angry and not taking it personally. Because they need someone that's going to give them that unconditional love, because you may be the rock that they're holding on to, and they're not telling you that, and they're not giving you that great feedback to make you feel that way.
They don't even recognize it at the time. I mean, people are in there, we're all in our stuff, and when you're a child, you are in the moment, you're in the immediacy. I mean, that's how we're programmed. And so
that's a great point.
To be resilient, I think we have to hold out hope that someday this is going to pay off, right? Someday my child's going to recognize that. And even if you're just dealing with a typical adolescent who's making you crazy, right? I mean, we deal with that to think, our relationship surely is not going to be like this forever.
Right. So being your child's rock.
I always tell my friends, just wait till they're 19 or 20, they'll be fine.
All right, should we talk about concrete support?
Yes. Move on.
Is the last protective factor?
No, there's one more. So concrete support in times of need is, the definition within strengthening families is the ability to identify, access, and receive needed adult, child, and family services. And this is a lot of what you're involved with. So what does it mean to you? What does it mean to have concrete support in times of need?
So I'd like to go back to you, because earlier you talked about our last webinar and how that tied into this idea. So
I was watching the webinar last month with the Department of Health and Welfare, and she was talking about having an emergency crisis plan, and I wanted to jump through the screen while I was watching it, because I was thinking, this is strengthening families. The emergency crisis plan is, and Jane, I don't think you saw it, but it's the idea of when you're not in crisis with your family, you sit down calmly and figure out, okay, I know what kind of things may cause crisis. I know what crisis looks like with my family and my child, and so I'm going to line up a plan, and we're going to post it on the refrigerator so that when those triggers go off, we'll know exactly what to do. And on that plan, she was talking about what friends or support people can you call on if you need respite, and I thought, well, that's healthy social connection. She talked about what agencies you could call, what different places, physical places that you could go, or different agencies you could call, and I thought, well, that's concrete support in times of need. Everything just lined up perfectly, and afterwards I was thinking, well, if you have to put this emergency crisis plan into practice, then of course you'd feel more resilient. Right. You would feel like, oh my gosh, look at what I did. I was able to handle that. And it also occurred to me that the knowledge of parenting and child development, just the fact that you know what these triggers are going to be, would probably help you to prevent them before they even happen. You'd have those really early warning signs, so that if this is the crisis point, I'm going to recognize those signs far, maybe days or weeks ahead of when the crisis actually would happen, and figure out, and that's knowledge of parenting and child development and social and emotional competence. So it all just really goes together. It's one of the things that we love about strengthening families. It gives a common language to many, many different, I would dare to say all family serving agencies and to all parents. You can start to realize, oh, I'm feeling under stress. And you know what those triggers feel like in yourself. And when you start to feel like you're under stress, you start to think, okay, what do I need right now? Do I need to find out something about my child's development because it's happening here? Or do I need to call my friend Sally because I just feel like I need to talk to her right now? I need that social connection. So it gives you a framework and a common language with other people as far as being able to discuss the needs of your children and your family. So that emergency crisis plan, I thought, oh my gosh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
It fits right in.
Exactly. And I think that's the most perfect example of concrete support. And it's also the idea that definitely is to be able to, prevent crises, but also for many families, they are going to happen. So they hit that crisis, but they're kind of like along the way, recognizing it. They know how to respond. They know who to contact. But then once they hit the crisis, I think also when you're coming back out of crisis is to be able to spend some time and what do we do after a crisis? How do we as a family, using our resiliency, come back together to support one another, to forgive one another, and to be able to move forward from that crisis and look at, so what maybe could we have done differently? How do we next time either respond to be able to prevent it or to be able to support the child that's going through crisis to get them what their needs are, so crisis doesn't end up with, being at the hospital, having to call in the police or something like that. What does my individual child need? And if the child is old enough to include them in that discussion of what do you need when this starts happening?
Right.
What do we do to support you? And then coming out of it, how do we support you coming out of it so you can move forward from it?
What a way to help your child to be resilient, for them to understand what they can do themselves. That's really, resilience really comes from within. So that's a really good point.
So I would just say that I think that a real important part not to miss on concrete support in times of need is that the understanding that our basic needs must be met. So do we have housing? Do we have electricity? Do we have enough food? Do we have transportation to get to where we need? That is the bottom line on the hierarchy, and we need to make sure that the families that we're working with have their basic needs met, so that they can then move on to these higher level things. Because, and I think that it probably basic needs being met looks different in different families, and when a family has a complex need, it might look very different. I mean, access to education might not be as easy as it is for someone dropping their kindergartner off, right? And so it's like we have to recalibrate for that and understand and respect that basic needs are basic needs, but that does not mean the same thing. It's about it's about equity. It's not about equality. And so how can we make sure that that's happening, and that the support systems that support families understand that? That just because I need more doesn't mean that I'm getting more. It means that to have a level playing field, our basic needs must be met, but basic doesn't mean the same for everyone.
Good point.
I think when one of the things that is the overarching principle of strengthening families is that it's all about relationships. A lot of people will say, oh, it's all about relationships. But strengthening families really is. So if you're a professional working with families, and we sometimes work with child care providers or with other people who work very closely with young children or with families, and they'll say, oh, yes, well, we have a resource book there for the family. So if they need food or if they need help with their electricity or something. But we say, are they going to come to you and ask you about that? You have to have a relationship with them before you're going to be the one that they're going to say. Many people will mask what their needs are because they want to look strong. We talk a lot in Strengthening Families about asking for help is a strength, which in many of our cultures it's not. You're supposed to offer help to everybody else, but Lord, no, you're not supposed to ask anybody for help. You're supposed to pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all of that. And so the relationship comes first. You have to have a relationship with the people that you're working with. And even on the parent level themselves, if you have friends, but it's a friendship that ends at a certain point, that they're not going to be the one that comes to you, And it's not that every single friend you have has to be that close, that you're the one that comes to. But, it's important to have some some friends that, really if you're out of food at the end of the month, that you can go to somebody, whether it's your child care provider or your the support group or your Facebook group or whatever for help, and to not be embarrassed that you need help. We all need help sometimes.
It's also about not only about asking for help, but being able to receive help. So I'm just curious, in your experience, do families struggle with receiving help?
I would say yes. I mean, I think there's always that sense of embarrassment with accepting help. I think culturally,
Yes.
we're that's admitting that that your family's having struggles. So I like that you said that it is, one of the strengths is being able to accept help. Because I think across the board, I think a lot of people do have a hard time with that.
Yeah. Yeah, we talk a lot about when you are able to receive help, then you are in a position to help other people. So when you have received help and you're at a place then where you are managing, then that you have an opportunity to help other people. And I think there's a lot of stigma around asking for help and receiving help. There's a lot of shame, and it's so interesting because it's just an absolute fallacy that people can do everything by themselves. I know that's just it's not even. It's just made up. That's just a story we made up.
Right.
And
No man is not an island. Yes.
And so I think that but it takes a lot of time and effort in different families. Things look differently about around asking for help. And so I think that, like Maureen said, everybody needs help sometime. And the way we can grow stronger from that is maybe thinking about how when we get that help, we can help someone else. And of course, that reduces stress in our family, knowing that we have our basic needs met. If you've ever laid awake at night wondering how you're going to pay your mortgage, it's just horrible. And so having our basic needs met is really a critical protective factor.
Well, and also I think that is, again, modeling for your children.
Yes.
If in a time of need is that you can reach out and ask and you can accept help, that's a good example for your children.
Yeah. Right.
Moving on. So the last protective factor is called cognitive, social, and emotional competence. And this is involving having secure adult and peer relationships, experiencing, regulating, and expressing emotions. We like to simplify it and say that it's about children learning to talk about and handle their feelings. Having an emotional vocabulary, many children have grown up where it wasn't okay to express their emotions, or they were only allowed to either be happy or sad and nothing in between. And so they don't learn this emotional vocabulary. And so I love this chart, and many of you have probably seen charts like this that have lots and lots of different faces for different emotions. So you can start to first of all, accept all emotions that your child. There are no good and bad emotions. And so if you start to teach your children that you're going to accept whatever they're feeling and help them to recognize it, and then help them to handle it appropriately. It's all right to be angry. It's not all right to punch your brother in the nose. So that's one of the very important protective factors as far as families handling strength. So what do you think about that?
I love this in many ways. One is that I think, for the child that is in counseling and working with clinician or something like that, a lot of this they're doing, but that idea of how do you bring it home?
Yes.
But also bringing the siblings into this.
Yes.
And for the parents, because, we're talking about adults who did not grow up. So I think we as adults need to be able to learn to do this, because again, we're modeling for our children, and then supporting the work that a lot of our kids are doing and working with in long-term therapy, but then also bringing the siblings in and helping them to identify, because it's hard growing in a family where there is a child with special needs, so helping them to identify, and that it is okay. I mean, to be feeling like they're not happy about certain circumstances that are occurring at home, and helping them to identify those feelings beyond just happy and sad. So, I mean, the benefits for the entire family, but I think it is a process. I think you have to practice it.
Yes.
I think you as parents, or we as parents, have to be doing it so that our kids become familiar and comfortable with it.
Right. And we talked at the beginning of our conversation about how strengthening families is a two-generation approach, and this is a perfect example. So we see children who are in classrooms and they develop a social, emotional vocabulary, and they start to bring that home, and it does help parents then identify what they're feeling and use that language, and then in that way the family culture begins to shift, where emotions might become might become more okay to talk about your emotions,
right,
or to talk about what you're feeling, because everybody in the family, in any family, has a lot of emotions. Some people are really upset about something and some people are not, and to be able to vocalize that and to know that it's okay to express how you feel.
Exactly.
It doesn't mean you get your way every time, but it does mean that someone is going to say, I hear what you're saying about that, right? They might not even understand why you're mad, but they can at least say, it's okay for you to say that you're angry or upset. And I think that the social and emotional vocabulary is important in developing competence. So sometimes you practice the vocabulary a long time before you become competent. And having one of these charts on your refrigerator is not a bad thing.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for kids to just be able to go up, it's like, how are you feeling? And them to be able to look at that chart and point to it. This is how I feel right now.
Well, for me to be able to do that.
For me, yeah.
For me to be able to do that, right? I mean, I think that we've all, it depends on, again, on how you what your relationship with this part of yourself is, right? I mean, it's okay to have many of those many choices. So when we think about social and emotional competence in a family, if you could think of a family that you know that really has that, it's like, what does that look like, and how does it like protect them from being overwhelmed by stress?
Well, I'm thinking actually of my daughter and my two grandchildren. Of course, they're the most wonderful children in the world, but she and her husband both are just very, very good at being accepting of the children. It's a boy and a girl, and we often kid that Nikki gets to raise her parents, because the little boy looks and acts exactly like my husband, and the little girl looks and acts exactly like me. They're both much cuter than we are, but she's very outgoing, very talkative, and her emotions are right up on top all the time, where he's much more quiet and subdued and will retract. He'll run, if he's upset, he wants to be all by himself in his bedroom, where Libby, the little girl, is right out there screaming and hollering the way I am. So, and they're very good at accepting both of them. They're different temperaments. Actually, when you look at it, my daughter Nikki is much more like her son, and my son-in-law Zach is much more like the daughter. And so, and I think they're aware of that. They see that. They see those temperament differences, and so they don't expect. A lot of it is not expecting your children to react to things exactly the way you would,
right.
Because so it's not like, oh, why are you acting like that? This is not a big deal. Why are you acting like that? Well, to Libby, it is a big deal. If she wants to wear her pink skirt and the pink skirt is in the washing machine, then that's a huge deal for her, and she's going to have a fit about it. And so it gets back to that real accepting, recognizing emotions, being able to say to her, oh, it's really frustrating and makes you very sad when you want to wear your pink skirt and it's not available. And sometimes this goes back to brain development. If somebody is in that animal part of their brain of just feeling anger about something, and then you talk to them about it, when you start to put words on it, it moves them up into their adult thinking brain. And so it diffuses that whole fight or flight response. It diffuses it because now I'm in the thinking part of my brain. So that can be a big help in just diffusing volatile situations in a household.
And, as we discussed this, like you had said earlier, everything kind of integrates together. So you see how this ties into resilience.
Oh, yeah.
Because the more that a family can identify how they're feeling, understand, recognize, accept, you have a more resilient family. So that as we hit those, we ebb and flow, is that it doesn't knock people off the track. It just,
Right.
you kind of continue to move
Right.
forward.
And as professionals and as parents both, I think the professionals I'm sure are trained to recognize when parents are having an emotion, when they need to talk. But with children too, we can work on making sure that we are hearing them and not being dismissive, not being stopping, not trying to make it better. If someone is desperately sad, that is okay to be sad, right? We don't need to, my default reaction would be to, give somebody a cookie or to,
Right.
say, do you want to go to the park, or what can I do to make it better, right? And so it's like learning from our own lives what the appropriate response is, and getting comfortable with the discomfort of emotion, because for some of us it's really uncomfortable to see kids sad, or
Exactly,
or
yeah.
it's really uncomfortable to see my boys being sad but not my girls. So what are the differences when we're talking about gender? Like what did I learn about gender and emotions in my family's culture, and how is that coming to play with how I'm parenting? And so those are all big questions, again, that we can reflect on. And in the end, I think you said, it's like understanding your child is knowledge of parenting and child development, their emotional tendencies, their emotional abilities, their social skills, and understanding these all together means lower stress in families.
This is one of the reasons why we have several lesson plans in the training manual about communication skills, about recognizing emotions. We have a link to John Gottman's Institute of Emotion Coaching. I don't know if you're familiar with, but that is a great resource, and we have some lesson plans that are based on emotion coaching. So I think of it as being as important as knowing your family culture, to know how to do that, and how that active listening and emotion coaching. It's just a real important thing, and I imagine it's even more important for families with complex needs.
Yes, I mean, this does not solve all the problems. It doesn't take them
no,
away,
no.
but it gives an approach on how to work your way through things and to come out as a stronger family,
Right.
That doesn't fall off the tracks,
Right.
When things go wrong.
And to me, the most important part about strengthening families is giving yourself credit.
Right.
Every parent does excellent things. Every parent wants what's best for their child. They love their child, and we don't give ourselves enough credit, because sometimes it's like it's challenge upon challenge, and it feels like failure upon failure.
Right.
But strengthening families is really about giving yourself credit for the good work that you're already doing within your family. And I think that we'll just look at one more slide real quickly to kind of just show families like what you might do if there's an opportunity in your family, just to kind of discuss these protective factors with each other, to see where you learned them and where you how much of them are present in your family. So this is just a kind of an exercise that you can think about. It's like, so to reflect on these questions, what have you learned over the course of your life about bouncing back from adversity? So to think about that, to talk about that with your spouse or with your parenting partner or with your friends. What did you learn? What did that look like? And how is it looking now? And how is that serving you, right? What have you learned about the importance of having friends? To reflect on that. Are your friends mainly your family? If you need to find different friends, how do you do that? How do you go about finding them? How do you go about connecting with people who you feel understand you? You could talk about how you feel, or what you learned over the course of your life about needing or asking for help. Often this is a loaded question for families, right? They just often learn you don't do it. And so if that's the case, but you recognize that you have a need, how can you find support in making that culture shift in your own family? We ask about, where did you learn about how to parent? And what does that mean? And what are the implications for the family that you're parenting? And then finally, about that child who didn't fit in. Because we've all raised or been around or been friends with or known a child who didn't fit in. And what did you learn from that experience? Did it teach you compassion? Did it teach you to be afraid of people who don't fit in? Did it teach you, did you see people being mean to a person who didn't fit in? All that relates to social and emotional competence, and we learn that growing up subconsciously, and then we ask ourselves, how is it reflecting now in our parenting?
And we often start many of our trainings, when we train parents, or when we do parenting classes, or when we train professionals who work with families, we often start with an activity like this, because one of the hallmarks of strengthening families is that it's not something that we teach other people. It starts from within ourselves, and we can't teach what we don't know. So if we can reflect on these protective factors in our own life and what was modeled to us or not as we were growing up, one of the aha moments that often happens is that people realize, oh my goodness, my parents weren't very resilient. You know, my father lost his job, and mom started drinking, and dad committed suicide, and this, that, and the other. And then I learned that's not how I'm going to handle adversity in my life. So you can get the protective factors either from having them modeled for you or not.
Right.
And that to me is one of the real exciting things about this framework, that, you know, we all have all of these protective factors, and we can choose. We can choose how, if I don't feel very resilient, what are the things I can do that are going to help me to feel more resilient? And what can I do to choose and have healthy social connections? So we can, we already have them, and then we can build them and make them stronger.
Yeah, so I think one of the strengths is just what you said, is that we are not asking parents, here's something else new you need to do.
Correct.
You have to go learn these new things and incorporate it into, is the realization that these things already exist. And it's being very intentional about recognizing the benefits and how to strengthen those areas, and how it will build a stronger family. So yeah, so recognize you have these things, and families are already doing a lot of this well. So how do we even build it stronger? And again, I think it's huge in terms of a family's ability to withstand some of the challenges that all families are going to go through, and then the recognition that some families have more. They just go up and down, and have those ebbs and flows happen a little bit faster.
Right.
So fabulous information. So is there is there a website if parents want more
Yes.
information?
The next slide. Like we said in the beginning, Strengthening Families is a framework that was developed by the Center for the Study of Social Policy. The website of their information is strengtheningfamilies.net, and on that website there is an enormous amount of information. There's an online training that you can take, and there's different tracks that go off, so whether you're a parent or a professional or someone else, just a community member, there's different tracks you can take for each of these on, and those are all free. They have these self-assessment forms that I was talking about that can be used by professionals, or I think they're a good checklist for parents to look at too. There's other training materials, professionals who want to maybe bring the Strengthening Families framework into their work situation. There are PowerPoints you can download for free on that site, and other resources as well. Our website is called Butterfly Trainings That Transform, and it's butterflyttt.com. And I have links on my website to lots of other resources, and also the manual that we were talking about. That's our newest training material. The full title of the book is Strong, Teaching the Strengthening Families Protective Factor Framework to Parents and Professionals. And like I said, there's 55 lesson plans in there that can be used for parenting groups, or even if you're a professional and just want to do a one-time presentation to somebody, there's introduction activities. There's lots of different materials in there, and the books are for sale. Contact information for me and Jane is on the website, so we'd be happy to hear from you if you like the book, or if you'd like us to come and do any kind of presentations for you. We're happy to do that.
So I mean, you're a great resource statewide.
Yes.
The information's available. Those that are beyond the Boise area, for those that are in the Treasure Valley, you're local.
And we've done national trainings. We've trained people in, I think, 12, 13 different states now. We've trained people, so our materials are being used all over the country. It's really very exciting.
Thank you for all that you do.
And we know a lot of connections, so if we're not the right resource, it's our responsibility and our honor to try to find those people. This country is on fire with strengthening families. There are people in every level of government that are working hard to bring the protective factors to life in families and communities and systems. And so there's always someone who can help you. And we have a network that can assist in that, so that's another option.
So
Ladies,
thank you so
thank
much.
you, thank you so much for your time and all that you're doing in the community. And we know it's making a difference.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Thank you much. And we will see you next month, August 3rd. Come back and join us again. Okay, now I need to sit here and wait.
Okay.